What's up, everyone? It's Matt Mrozik, and this is going to be the next work in progress on the 160th NeoGrade Sazabi. So last work in progress, we finished up getting everything, all the magnets and pinning done and everything. I've got a little bit of wiring to figure out still, but I can do that after I do the priming and stuff. And it's basically, where am I going to route wires from these shoulder thrusters into the chest? So I've got to drill a hole somewhere coming through the side, and I don't know where I'm going to do that yet. To be least conspicuous as far as seeing wires go. So it's pretty easy to route them up in this area and then come over this piping detail, and I can just by the times I'll just wrap it in black shrink wrap, so it may just look like part of the mechanical bits, but I really need to figure out where I'm going to drill into this side on both sides of the torso. So I don't know. There's really not any good spot that's I kind of molded in. I have to sacrifice some detail somewhere to do that, and I got to decide where I want to sacrifice that detail. My initial thought is to do it down here in the lower corner, where it's like there's like a little piston detail that goes up in there, but maybe just sacrifice that one little piston detail and drill a hole through there. I'd actually really like to do it kind of on the top and just have that wire and make it look like a conduit or something, but there's no meat really there to do that. So I got to figure that out. So now what I'm going to do is, again, today is going to be cleaning up my work area. So this is what my work area looks like at the end of each day. And this is actually pretty light. This is after all the drilling and sanding. This is after just yesterday, but so this process is very messy. So the next step is I'm going to break this all down into all its individual pieces, and I broke out my ultrasonic cleaner. I've got this big ultrasonic cleaner. I bought this years ago when I first got into 3D printing, and I haven't used it in a long time. So I'm going to throw all the pieces in here. I think I can get them all in here at one time. That'd be great. I got this because when I got the frozen transformer, I needed something big enough to hold big prints. But again, I haven't used this in years, so. It's got a little heating element. I turn the heat all the way down. I don't want to heat the pieces up. I just want the ultrasonic feature. So I'm going to break them all down, put the pieces in there. I'm going to throw some purple power in there full strength and give this thing a good ultrasonic cleaning in purple power. And then I will take all the purple power out of the ultrasonic cleaner, fill it with soapy water, ultrasonic cleaning again. And then I'll take that out and just put clean water and just keep putting clean water in until the parts are rinsed thoroughly. So again, I'm very obsessive when doing these big kits like this as far as cleaning the resin goes, because again, there's a lot of handling, there's a lot of masking, and I want to make sure I get all that mold release off, all the sanding residue, all my fingerprints off the resin before I start throwing any primer on. So it's going to be a day of just basically cleaning the kit in prep for primer. We'll see how long it takes. I might start being able to throw primer on today, but I don't think so. It'll probably be Monday, because then once I get it all cleaned, all the parts have got to dry, and then I got to get them all on skewers and into foam blocks so I can kind of start planning and prepping the priming and painting phase. So yeah, so I'm gonna get this all broken down. We'll throw in the ultrasonic cleaner, and I'll show you how we clean the parts. Alrighty, so I got all the parts except for the big legs into the ultrasonic cleaner. Normally I would soak this stuff overnight in purple power. So purple power is just an industrial degreaser. I have a jug here. So I've got in here I've got about 3 gallons. It's about as much as I can get in there. I could probably put a little bit more. So I'm gonna set this for 20 minutes. You can hear it. It's not the most quiet thing, but it's gonna send ultrasonic vibrations through the cleaner. Kind of scrub the parts. Okay. What I'm going to do is for like 20 minutes in the purple power. And then I'll take out, then what I'll do is I'll empty it through the valve here. And I'll put soapy water in there with some detergent. So I'll do it again. Couple rounds.
Okay, so I spent the morning doing the purple power bath. I did it a few times. This only goes up to 30 minutes. So I did it one time. I took out all the little tiny pieces that fell to the bottom. You're not supposed to have parts directly on the bottom of this. That's where the vibrating unit is. So I took those out and just hand washed those. So I did the purple power for a total of 2 hours. So I just kept doing it for 30 minutes at a time. And I take the parts out, rinse them off, do it again. So it's a long process. This is shorter than doing it overnight, so I can get it all washed in one day. So now I've got in here, I've just got some warm water with some soap. And what's that's going to do? That's going to scrub off all the purple power. So I'll do this for about an hour, get all that residue off. And I'll drink this with clean water for a couple hours. Also. So you're not supposed to put your hand in here while it's running, because you can actually, at first you don't feel it, but I've done it in the past, and after a while it starts to hurt your skin. So you don't want to, you got to be careful with ultrasonic cleaners, especially big ones like this, because if you do put your hand in there while it's running, it will feel like your skin's burning, so you got to be careful with it.
Bobby, it is Monday morning, and so last Friday, last thing I did was strip everything down, take it all apart, and I ran it through the ultrasonic cleaner with the purple power, soapy water, and clean water. So we should have really clean parts. Like this is most of them. I've got a few over there. So now what we get to do is we get to put all the parts on skewers and get ready to throw some primer on. Now there is still some lighting routing I've got to do, mainly for the shoulders, but I can kind of figure that out here in a little bit. So nothing hardcore scientific about this. I got a crap load of skewers that I put clips on. I've had these for going on like 15 years. I hope I have enough. Over the years, I've lost some, I broke some, I've cut them up. But it's real simple. You put it on a skewer and stick it in the foam. So I do that with all the parts, and I lay them out basically like part type. So I'd like do the arms and the legs and the torso. And I'm going to get primer on this today. So it's going to take me, it seems like pretty simple, but it will take me a good portion of the day to do this, because I'm going to get them all in the skewers, and then I'm going to use Stynylrez primer. Now in the past, I would have used Krylon Max primer, but I can't get that anymore. And this Stynylrez actually dries really nicely, and it sands really well. So it's perfect for wet sanding. So it's actually a really good sandable primer. I could use automotive primer, but that's a little thick. This will be perfect. So I'm going to do a round of primer. I'll put 2 coats on everything. I'll let it dry overnight, even though technically I could probably sand this after about a couple hours. But it's good just to let your primer dry overnight. That way you have good adhesion. And then tomorrow will be wet sanding. So once I get these all skewered up, we'll be in the spray booth shooting some primer. Okay, so I've been working on getting these skewered up the past hour or so. And so some of these I don't have holes or a way to clamp, so I just use blue tack and I just put it on a skewer, like these 2 parts right here. There's no pins or anything in these, so there's just some blue tack. So what I do is once this foam block is filled, which is almost full, I keep an empty one to the side, so as I prime, I can prime and throw it into that block, and then I'll have to kind of get some of these bigger pieces on clamps and stuff. But one thing I wanted to mention is, as I'm doing this and as I'm washing all the parts, I'm constantly taking a mental inventory of the parts to make sure I haven't lost anything, because with this many pieces and some of them being very small, you know, the chance of losing something goes up. The more pieces, the more chance you have of losing something. So I'm constantly taking mental inventory. I think in all the years of doing Gundams, I think I may have only lost maybe 2 parts, really small parts that I was able to kind of resculpt and make. But yeah, so just constantly taking mental inventory of the parts. And as I'm putting these on the skewers, I'm also checking them over again, constantly checking for errors that I could fix now before I start throwing primer on. But primers are really going to show me how my scribing work looks and how my sanding looks and all that stuff. So primers kind of will show all my mistakes if I have any. So I'm going to keep going, and I'll start throwing primer on here in a minute. Okay, so Stynylrez. The trick with Stynylrez to get this to spray right is you have to shake the ever-living shit out of it, because it separates, okay? A lot of people think you need to thin it. You don't have to. You can thin it with a little bit of water if you want. Don't thin it with alcohol. Don't thin it with anything else. Just thin it with water if you need to thin it. But you have to shake the ever-living shit out of it. So, yeah. So I've been shaking this for about a minute, and we continue shaking it here for another 30 seconds or so. I use my vortex shaker, and I just sit here and I just turn it upside down, and I want to make sure it gets incorporated really well. And then usually I spray this through my Iwata HPTH brush. My hold on one second, my airbrush is not working. It helps when I have the right airbrush in the booth. I had the wrong airbrush. I went and bought new tip and needle sets for my Neos. I love my Iwata Neos. They're like the cheapest Iwata brushes out there, but I love them. I use them just about everything. Okay, I'll spray a few pieces with this without the fan on, so it's nothing. No, there's nothing. Again, nothing scientific about it. Nothing crazy. Now I got my air pressure turned up a little bit because this stuff is a little on the thicker side. But again, it's just a matter of, again, I'm gonna put one coat on, I'll put 2 coats on today. I'll let it dry overnight, and then I'll go through and I'll wet sand most of the parts. I will not wet sand every single part. Like all this like mechanical detail stuff, this won't get wet sand because you just can't get in there. But we'll get 2 coats, 2 light coats of primer. And I coat every single spot of it, even if I don't think I'm going to see it. And you got to turn these pieces a lot. Make sure you get all the different, just keep turning it to make sure you get in all the crevices. And then now Stynylrez, when it first goes on, it looks a little rough, but it's amazing how well it evens out. It's kind of crazy. First time I used it, like, oh man, this is like shit. And then as it dried, it really smoothed out nicely. So that's it. Okay. So I'm just slowly building it up, making sure I cover everything. So this takes a long time. So again, you're doing thin layers and just making sure we get all the nooks and crannies. The parts that have a lot of detail are going to take longer because I'm just really concentrating to make sure I get primer everywhere. Constantly turning it in the light, making sure I cover everything. So this Neo has a 0.35 needle through it, so some of it will go through at 0.35 just fine. Just gotta crank up your air pressure a little bit. But as I spray this, I can kind of see somewhere where my sanding correctors are. So like this part, I'll wet sand all the flat areas where I sanded to get rid of gates and stuff, but I'm not gonna try to go through and wet sand all that stuff. You just can't do that. Let's do a piece where I did some scribing on so we can see how the scribing looks. Let's do this big shoulder armor. Good opportunity to see how much all that work in scribing. And as I'm spraying this, I'm taking mental note if I see any little errors that I may have missed. Mold lines, scribing. Just kind of taking mental note of all those areas that may need some additional attention when I go to wet sand. Now I do take the tip guard off because this you'll get dry tip pretty easily with the Stynylrez. So right there you can see all that scribing, how clean it looks. So it's worth the effort. All right, so I'm gonna spend the next several hours priming everything, and then I'll be back. Okay, so it's about 5 o'clock and perfect timing because I just got done putting the second coat of primer on everything. These are all like the little itty bitty parts. And it took forever. I don't know how many hours I sprayed. I sprayed basically all afternoon. But man, it just takes a long time because there's a lot of parts. The first coat takes the longest because I'm just really making sure I get coverage on everything. The second coat goes a little quicker, but here's all the other. Oops, 1 second. Sorry, my fan kicked on. Here are all the big parts, for the most part, armor, shield. You can see the primer's still kind of wet. Legs and weapons and everything. So yeah, so I'm gonna let this sit overnight. And then tomorrow we start the long process of wet sanding. Overall, everything looks really good. I found a couple, probably about half a dozen pinholes in some of the parts. I found some mold lines. I found some panel lines that went awry when I was scribing. So there's going to be a little bit of putty work to do here and there. It shouldn't be too bad. But tomorrow is just wet sanding, and it's going to take a long time. I'm anticipating about 2 days just to wet sand before I can put more primer on, because this is when I really go in and fix everything and make sure everything's really looking good. So again, the prep on these things just take a long time, but it's well worth it in the end. Okay, so it is Tuesday. We got all the parts in primer yesterday. Here they are, all 345 of them. And we have a long day or two of sanding. If you don't like the sand, don't build model kits. If you don't like the sand, stay away from resin kits. So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna wet sand, okay? So this is where I'm gonna go through and really check for errors. I do have some putty work to do. I've gotta plug some holes where I drilled that it really shouldn't have drilled. I've got some scribing lines that aren't quite great. I've got a couple of mold lines I gotta fix. So I have a setup here. This is some warm water with soap in it. That's what I use for sanding. I have my ultrasonic cleaner set up next to me with soap, with water, with a little bit of soap in it. As I wet sand the parts, I'm gonna throw them in the ultrasonic cleaner because they're gonna get another bath. So the parts are constantly getting washed. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna pull a couple random pieces. I'm going to do a tape test to make sure that my primer has good adhesion, because all this is for naught before we go to do masking later if the primer comes up. So I'm just going to pull a thigh armor. I'm going to get some Tamiya tapes. That's what we'll be using for masking. And let's hope that our cleaning was good. So I put it down and I rip it off, and I just give it a real good rip. Okay. So it looks like we have good adhesion. I'm just gonna do like one part because they're all washed the same way. They're all handled the same way. So there we go. All right, pretty cool. Looks like we have good adhesion. So the tape goes away. That's for later. I'm gonna be using 800 grit wet dry sandpaper. So one thing you want to do when you're wet sanding is, again, I always put a little bit of soap in my water. That helps clean the paper. It helps clean the part. I soak the paper. So I've got this cut up into smaller sections. So I'll just leave it in the water here. And as the piece of paper wears out, I'll just throw it away. So I'm going to do that. So I got these cut up into workable sections. I can also use sanding sponges if I want to. More likely I'll use the 800 grit sandpaper for most of this. So you want to soak the paper because it'll make it cut better, and it's just, otherwise it'll get clogged up real easily. So it performs better if you soak it, okay? So I'll put that to the side. I'm also gonna make some sanding sticks. For these I do have to glue it on, so I'm gonna super glue some 800 wet dry sanding sticks to some popsicle sticks. That way I can, for flat surfaces, because I'm also going to go through as I'm sanding, I'm going to check all my bevels, all my edges, and I want to have a flat surface. I'm going to have an X-Acto blade with a brand new knife in it. And we're just going to make sure I got really good light so I can see what I'm doing. But yeah, so this is 2 light coats of primer and everything. It took forever to spray this yesterday. Again, most of this is going to get sanded off. it's really a guide coat for sanding. Check for errors and stuff. So I'm using 800 grit sandpaper because the final primer is going to be Mr. Surfacer 1200, which is it's a really smooth primer. The stylo res actually dries really smooth, and you're putting it on, it looks really kind of crappy. It looks real orange peely, but actually levels out very nicely. So this looks really smooth. There's some dirt here and there I noticed while it's spraying. Yeah, so let me get some sanding sticks made, and we'll come back and I'll show you how to wet sand. It's nothing exciting. It's just sanding. And then I got a couple errors. Like right here, there's a, when I was scribing, I kind of want to skew, so that I have to have some red putty work. Some areas that need Bondo. I could use a 2-part epoxy, but that'll take 24 hours to cure, and I don't want to wait that long. Where are they? Hold on. I gotta find them in the sea of parts. Oh. Okay, so like on the leg thrusters, when I was trying to figure out how to route the wires, I wasn't sure what I was doing. So I've got some holes I don't want, so I'm gonna fill these, and I'm gonna clean this all up here a little bit. Again, we're not gonna see this ones together, but I just wanna make sure it's nice and tidy. So I'm just gonna fill in a few of these details, particularly these little cutouts, because where the holes ended up, it kind of disrupts them anyway. So I'm just going to fill this smooth. I'm going to fill these holes right here, because initially I thought I was going to have the wires coming out this way, but I decided to go out the top and into the back of the leg. But yeah, so I'll be back once I get some sanding sticks made, and then we will go from there. Okay, so I got some sanding sticks made. Just glue some 800 grit, some popsicle sticks. Pretty simple. Get your sanding paper and start sanding. Now this is going to take a very long time, and this is 800 grit. Sometimes I'll do 600, but the 800, it just it's a finer sanding scratch, so the Mr. Surfacer will fill that in just fine. But as you can see, I'm going to sand most of this off. Constantly dipping my paper, rinsing it off. But as I'm sanding, I can wipe away. I can see imperfections in the resin, all these little divots and things. That's what we want to get rid of. So again, this first round of primer is really just a guide coat. So any, right there has an imperfection. There you can see some deep sanding scratches. Sand until those are gone. Okay, here you can see where when I was scribing, I went a little awry with my knife. I'm gonna try to sand it out. If it's not too deep, I can sand it out. If it's too deep, then I'll have to, what I'll do is I'll make a pile of parts that need putty work, and I'll put it to the side. Like right here's a little mold imperfection. Got some deep sanding scratches there from my initial cleanup. This takes forever. It's just constant sanding. Anticipate probably 2 days of this. We'll see. I'm going to work for 8 hours today. I put in 8 hours yesterday. And this will also show me my scribing work, see how clean it is, if I need to go refine any of the lines. From my initial look while I was priming, the scribing looks really good, with those a few little slips here and there. Nice thing about wet sanding is it's good for your hands, especially with the soapy water. So you can see some pretty deep sanding scratches there from my initial cleanup. Sand until those are gone. The cool thing about this, what I like about this is once it's all sanded, all your panel lines are dark, and it looks really cool. But the Stylo Res sands very easily. It's a great primer for this. And like I said in the past, I'd use Krylon Max Primer. That's a little thicker, but it doesn't sand nearly as easily as this. It gums up your sandpaper quite a bit. So I buy the big bottles of Stylo Res. These 16 ounce, I think actually come in a 32 ounce. I probably used at least a quarter of a bottle, maybe half a bottle for this. So it's not super cheap. I'm not sure what's going on there. There's like a little, see that? I'm not sure what that is in the resin. But that's it. I mean, you sand and you look for imperfections. If there's an imperfection, you try to sand it out. If you need to, you do a little putty work. But yeah, you can see that we're going to basically take most of this primer off. I got a few. I may come in here with some, because those, hold on. Like these few little spots right here where I slipped with the knife isn't too deep. So I'm going to come in there with some 600 first. So I am going to use a little bit of 600 to get that out. And I'll follow it up with 800. We'll see if we can sand that out. And it's gone. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over that with some 800 to get rid of those 600 sand scratches. Again, the Mr. Surfacer comes in different numbers. So 500 is like the thickest of the surfacers, and I think it goes up to 2,000 now. Back when I was doing all this, it went up to 1,500. I've never used the 1,500. I've always only gone up to 1,200. So right here again, I've got a little slip of the knife. I'm going to try to sand that out. And my panel lines are really nice and deep, so I've got enough room to sand that out. You know, it's gone. I'm gonna keep this 600 over here because it's the same color. I really can't tell the difference between the two sandpapers. And there we go. So there we go. So just countless hours of this. I'll probably go live for a little bit, let people hang out and watch me sand, because I can do that live and it's easy to chat with people. But yeah, so I will come back later when I have something to show you that's more exciting than that. But that's the whole goal of today, and at least today and probably tomorrow is my guess. 2 days of sanding, you know. These things are just constant sanding, just a lot of fucking sanding. But in the end, it's well worth the effort because the paint job looks fucking fantastic. So I'll come back in a little bit. Okay, after day one of wet sanding, it's just crazy, a lot of work. This is what I got done so far. Actually, I got done a little bit more than I anticipated. I have a few areas where it looks like the primer may not have adhered very well. So I've been doing tape tests and nothing's been pulling up. But as I sand, I've been finding some spots. So what I probably will do is, to be safe, is once I get done sanding all this stuff, I'll soak it in purple power to give it a really good soak it like for 24 hours. And I'll take off any remaining primer that's on there, which I don't care about because, again, this is just a sanding guide. But it'll just make sure that the resin is really, really clean. before I put down the Mr. Surfacer and so on. So I'm going to call it a day. My hands are prunes. I've been doing this for 8.5 hours, and my thumbs are numb, and it's a messy process, but still got all this to go through. All these little itty bitty parts. Some of these like little, like I've been looking at like some of the detail stuff. Like I look at these pistons and I expect them really, really close. And if there's nothing wrong with them, I don't sand them. I just put them on the side for paint. So a lot of the smaller detail stuff will not get wet sanded because you just can't get in and wet sand it. If I see a mold line, I'll go sand that out, obviously. But I spent a lot of time in the initial cleanup with an Optivisor on getting mold lines out. I haven't found any mold lines. I've just found a few little. I found a mold slip. I found a couple bubbles I'm going to have to fill. But for the most part, my initial cleanup's been very, very good. It's just getting, it's really just, looking for any errors in the scribing and deep sanding scratches from the initial cleanup. But we're getting there. This is just a very long process, but it's worth it in the end. Okay, so it's been a few days, but between all the sanding and washing and all that stuff, it's now Thursday, and I just went through and I got another soak of the parts that I wet sanded, and they're all here in some soapy water and the ultrasonic cleaner. I'm going to wash those one more time. I've got all the parts over here that didn't get wet sanded. I inspected them, and if I saw a mold line or something, I pulled apart and sanded it, but these all looked really good, so I didn't do any sanding on these. So these are actually ready for paint. I do have a little bit of putty work so far. I'm going to fill some bubbles. These are the only bubbles in the whole kit I found are on this shoulder armor. I'm going to fill those bubbles. I'm going to fix this hole where I drilled through on accident. I've got a little hole right there where I drilled through on accident. And then on these thrusters on the legs underneath the armor, when I was deciding on how I was going to route the wires, when I decided to finally just go out the top like this, on this one I'm going to putty up this hole there and the holes on the back side here, just to clean that up a little bit. And I'm just going to kind of fill in these. I'm just smooth out these details here. I'm just going to clean this up a little bit so it's a little neater. Again, we'll never see this, but again, I just want to make sure it's tidied up a little bit. I'm just going to use some body filler for this. This is just Bondo / body filler. I'm going to mix it up, put it in there, sand it, prime it. So today's goal is to get the putty work done, get everything washed again, and then tomorrow, Friday, I'll spend the good portion of the day spraying Mr. Surfacer 1200, and then looking for more imperfections, and then after that, we should be ready for paint. I do have to put in an order for light, so I gotta do that tomorrow also. But yeah, so just a little bit of putty work today, get things washed and out drying so I can do Mr. Surfacer tomorrow. Okay, so it's Friday, it's about 11 o'clock. I spent the morning just kind of getting parts organized because there's a lot of them, and there's a constant kind of rotating door as far as parts that are primed, ready for paint, parts that are getting primed, parts that are primed and wet. So I've got set up here all the parts over here that got wet sanded and cleaned and double cleaned and all that stuff. And as I prime them, I'm putting them in this foam block over here. So that's what I've done so far this morning. And I'm going really slow. So this first round of primers is really just kind of get it on, and because I know I'm going to sand most of it off. The second round of primer, I'm really going slow, putting it on nice and slick. I'm stuck with the Stynylrez primer simply because it lays down really smooth. I bought a Mr. Surfacer primer, so Joseph paid for Mr. Surfacer primer, but I'm just going to substitute the Stynylrez because, and the only reason I'm doing that is because all the parts over here that didn't get any wet sanding, if I went over and primed Mr. Surfacer on top of them, they'd be a slightly different shade. And I don't think it would make a difference because basically everything gets base coated in a black or a dark black or gray. But I just wanted a consistent primer coat underneath the paint because your primer does have a huge effect on the results of your final color. So since the Stynylrez is spraying so smooth, I'm just sticking with it. And I'm just gonna go slow, get all these coated. As I'm spraying, I'm looking for little imperfections in the parts because even though I spent a crap load of time wet sanding, it doesn't mean I didn't miss anything. So like for instance, in this part, there's a little bubble right there. So I'm taking mental note as I spray of the parts that need additional putty work. I had very little putty work the other day, but once these are dry, I'll do an final inspection of all the parts, check for any errors one more time. And if I have to fix anything, I'll fix it. I had a couple magnets that came out because the ultrasonic cleaner, I think they just kind of vibrated out. So I have a few magnets I've got to glue back in, no big deal. But yeah, so today is just getting another coat of primer on all the parts that need it. That's going to take most of the day because it's a very slow process again. And then Monday, I'll do a final inspection of everything, and I'll put them all together again if I can, and then he'll be ready for paint. I still have to order lights. I'll look at that today and this weekend. But while I'm waiting for lights to arrive, I can start painting. I can start doing things while I wait for the lights to arrive. So anything that doesn't have to do with the lights, I can start painting. But anyway, so today is just kind of, again, my work area is just a mess because these things take up a lot of space, and you have to kind of rotate the parts as far as what you're doing with them. So these are parts over here are dried, ready for paint. Parts getting primed, parts after they're primed, drying. So it's a constant rotation, but that's what I'm doing right now. Okay, so it's Friday afternoon now, and everything's got more primer on it. Here's everything laid out here, with the exception of the thrusters and the thigh armor. So that's it for today. And we're gonna call this work in progress done. So Monday will be one more inspection of parts. I'm gonna do another dry fitting and everything. Glue the magnets back in that kind of fell out through the washing process. I think there's kind of, the ultrasonic cleaner actually like vibrated them out. There's like 3 or 4 that came out, no big deal. So I'm gonna do one more dry fitting, one more inspection of all the parts. As I was priming, I found probably half a dozen little spots that need some spot putty, nothing major. But we're looking really good, and then he'll be ready for paint. I got to order lights. As I'm waiting for those to come in, I can start painting some of the smaller parts, like the weapons, funnel, some of the things that don't require lights I can start painting. But yeah, into this work in progress. And again, lots of prep, guys. Lots of time just getting it ready for paint. But it's worth it in the end because your paint job is dependent on your prep. But yeah, he's getting there, looking good. So stay tuned for the next one. Thanks for watching.